Change, disrupt, adapt, repeat. You're listening to Pure Reinvention, the podcast for curious leaders, innovators, and people who are ready for the next level and beyond.
Reinvention is such a wonderful place to explore, and we're excited right now to be able to share some time with Sonya Robinson of the Detroit Metro Convention and Visitors Bureau. I've got to tell you a little story about Sonya. Sonya was working with MB Strategies and myself as we were working with the CVB on the assessment phase of their strategic planning. And Sonya became an absolute asset to my understanding of the city and its uniquenesses. Sonya became the real building block of my foundation of understanding. Sonya was able to translate for me many of the messages that were coming out of the city that at the time I did not understand. And Sonya was the one that really taught me about how important the translation of what the business or the city or the entity is trying to teach you, that while you don't have to be the translator yourself, you do have to have the ability to translate the message. And Sonya was that translator for me, and I will be forever grateful to her for sharing that time with me, and it's continued to be a wonderful way in which we've continued our professional relationship. So welcome, Sonya.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Sonya Robinson has continued on the journey of reinvention with us as we have continued to help others understand what reinvention is, how reinvention can be a vital and integral part of one's future. And Sonya Robinson was the one who, with myself, was able to discover some of what the city of Detroit was talking about as we were starting to listen to some of the characteristics of the city. So Sonya, can you take a few minutes and share your thoughts on, as we were talking to some of the key leaders within the city, and they were sharing their experiences with us about what the city was going through. Can you share with our listeners some of what was being expressed to us in some of those really important interviews?
Well, throughout the conversations that we had with those 20 to 40 individuals, some of the resounding messages that came out related to not so much the city and its capacity and its assets, but more so about the resilience that people throughout history took to make their strides and overcome challenges, in addition to the connections that they made. So it was more about the people and the passion, more so than anything else. I mean, the assets and the city, those were attractors, but they weren't the focal point. And that's what those key leaders thought was the opportunity for emphasis for us.
It's interesting that when businesses, associations, or municipalities look at what they have to offer, they think what they have to offer is their capacity, the number of rooms they have available, or certain attractions that are within their city or within their business that they can attract customers to. But as you are beginning to describe what we learned when we were interviewing key leaders in the city of Detroit, that isn't what they were talking about. They were talking about something very different. Can you expand on these thoughts, that what some of the leadership was telling us was talking about the resiliency of the people of Detroit and some of the passion that exists here that needed to be reinvented and brought back to the surface?
Well, I hope it doesn't throw us off course, but your question recalls to mind our visit to the Henry Ford. And when we watched the video, and it talked about Henry Ford and his journey on reinvention, and how that he looked back at, I guess it was the herding of sheep or farming industry, and looked at that assembly or that process, and how he transferred that information over into the automotive industry, and how from there we came over to the manufacturing industry. So that was just one key thing that I captured from one of our visits. It wasn't an individual per se that we were speaking to, but it was a message that was conveyed to us through an organization about transformation and reinvention and that process and the resilience, and how many times that he may have failed through that process, but he, through his passion to reach an end goal, whatever that end goal was, he resiliently went through that, made the right connections, gain the right information to achieve what he wanted.
I think there's a tendency that people have when they're thinking about reinvention, that there's this thought process that you start with a clean slate. And certainly while, for example, the bankruptcy of Detroit cleans the slate, what it doesn't change is the rich history that the entity has, whether it's the city of Detroit, whether it's the association or a business entity. And Sonya, what you're describing is we began to discover that people were very proud of their heritage. They were very proud of what had been accomplished in the past. They were very proud of what they had survived leading up to this point, that they felt very passionate. I'm going to use this word, and I want you to really expand on this word. Were they taking ownership of the city? Were they owning the city and the passion that was necessary for the city to get back on its feet or for the business to reinvent itself?
I would have to say yes.
And why is it that they were willing to take ownership of something that was so large or was so big as opposed to just minding their own business? Why were they willing to take that on?
It was just home to them. It was, it's just innate from what I can tell. I mean, even as an individual myself, it's just something that's there that says, grab a hold to this, don't let it go, keep moving.
This is mine, I care, I want it to be better, and I'm willing to do my part. It seemed very probable when we were doing these interviews and kind of discovering this that we did run into a large number of people who, while recognizing the challenge that the city was going through, equally was enthused about where the city was going. And I think that's because of that ownership issue, that they were willing to say, this is my city, I am here to stay, and I will do my part. And I want you to spend a few minutes, Sonya, and say, how important is that ownership in reinvention?
Ownership and, well, reinvention, from what I've played with thus far through our journey here, is it's a process that requires resilience because you have challenges that existed there before you even started the journey. And to be able to know, you learn flexibility as a requirement. Even though you don't really anticipate it at the beginning, you learn that it's a requirement. And you may have one slated path that you think is going to take you to your end state, but you may have to veer off of that path. And that may mean dismissing some individuals or dismissing some previously known assets in order to segue to another route towards your end goal. So that takes some passion, it takes some resilience, and it also takes a tailored attitude and conviction.
That's an interesting word that I haven't heard before, tailored attitude. So tell me about a tailored attitude and how the tailored, you began to recognize the tailored attitude in the city of Detroit.
I guess I can use the example of the Convention and Visitors Bureau. When we started upon our process, we wouldn't probably call it reinvention. We just knew that we were approaching a big group of key customers that we wanted to attract and have them come back. So that was our end goal, was to host a big party for them. But in the end, or throughout the process, we had to bring in a consultant to help us with that. We wanted someone to help us with the strategic planning. And so as an organization, it's not a norm for us to bring in a consultant who is kind of digging. We don't really allow the digging, but in this instance, we allowed the digging somehow. But we gave him a partner, which was myself. So I guess that's what helped it as well.
Did some safe digging.
Some safe digging. And so to a point, I forgot the beginning of your question, but there was a journey that we took, and we had to learn some new ways tailoring our attitude. So understanding that this may be touchy ground, per se, with an outsider coming in looking intently, but we had to flex our conversation, flex our approach when we were presenting this consultant before an executive leader or a key colleague who he wanted to speak with or connect with. So that's what I meant by tailored attitude.
Sure.
Not to be overbearing, but to be kind of submissive but pointed.
That's an interesting observation, because what you also included in that was that there had to be permission granted
Right.
to an outsider to allow a little disruption or a little discovery to take place. Would you say that everybody was comfortable with that process?
No, I
No.
don't think I was totally comfortable with the process because, again, everything kind of was changing along the journey. But I knew that in the end, something right had to come out of it because our leadership had blessed it. So,
Sure. And it's interesting you say you mentioned that, because as we walk along a path, if we want to have confidence in where the path is going, we look far enough ahead to see where it is. But in this particular case, the path was unfolding as we were walking. It was far enough that it gave us the confidence we could continue on the path, but it was indeed rolling out in front of us as we were moving down that path. And it takes a certain amount of tailored attitude, which is a great word that you have just identified. The tailored attitude that gave you the confidence to say we were going to be okay going down this pathway. We weren't quite sure where it was going to lead us, but that's part of the discovery process. And your executive leadership had supported that.
right.
Why did they support that risk?
I guess it has something to do with that passion and the determination to shift from what we've done previously to make something blossom.
In the past history, municipalities and businesses have sometimes focused on things that they have. A city can focus on a major attraction, or a business can focus on a major product line that it has. In our discovery of reinvention, though, what we began to understand was there was something different that people started talking about that was different than the stuff. And it relates to the passion, and it relates to the attitude, and it starts to bring us towards reinvention. If you remember, we had thought that it was the stuff that people would come to or be attracted to an entity for, and what we realized is the attraction was something very different. That the people were telling us what we have here that's special is not necessarily the stuff. Can you share with us some of what we discovered that was that special, that wasn't just the normal stuff?
I guess it would have to be the people. I mean, there was really some connectivity to what the intelligence, emotional, intellectual, well, all they had to offer.
Yes, that's a very, that to me was a very unique discovery, in that the thing that was here to share was the very thing that had been here all along. That this was the learning laboratory, that every day there's a new opportunity to learn and grow and to develop, that every day there is a unique combination of events that can be put together to change and create a different outcome, and that the limitations that might have used to exist in the past, perhaps those limitations now don't exist, as we've allowed entrepreneurs and others to come in and completely redefine what they can create. And I'm pretty sure, as you have walked the cities of Detroit and you've seen these new businesses popping up, you see that as you are experiencing the city. Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah. And what is it about these people that you notice when you start to see these entrepreneurs and the sparkle in their eye as they start to make a difference?
Well, one key factor is that they're starting off young, and another characteristic is they're just passionate about what they do.
I think that's really, really, really an interesting observation, that a lot of the reinvention that's going on in the city of Detroit right now is to a generation of individuals who are entering their productive years in society. Those individuals in their 30s, upwardly mobile, interested in being somewhere where things are happening. They're happening relatively quickly. They want to live here. They want to play here. They want to make their fortune here, and this becomes the place to do that. Mm-hmm. But I think those parallels also exist within a company. If you can attract people in who can take ownership of their roles, who can take ownership of the outcome, and feel like they have the ability to develop, in some ways, to an unlimited capacity because they have those unique opportunities. Another key area that I know that you and I have talked about that has allowed for a key characteristics of the reinvention here in this city is what we discovered that we called connect. Can you talk about connect and what connect means as we discovered it in the city of Detroit?
Connect refers to just that, connecting people to either resources or other people to achieve a desired goal. For instance, when we go back to the Henry Ford example, we could say he connected himself with the farming industry. He learned and invested time to understand that, probably spoke with people in that industry before he was able to transfer that knowledge over into what we now call the manufacturing industry for automobiles. So that's a part of the whole connect thought process, and how we generally do it today, but maybe sometimes not often enough to achieve a goal, is to surround ourselves with those right people who are positive or key players in helping us excel towards a certain path.
It's interesting that the word connect, which sometimes we feel we need to do this all by ourselves in order to be successful. What you're describing, Sonya, is that when we have the confidence to connect with others and to use them to enhance everyone gains in that rather than trying to do it individually.
Even with the assessment that we did here with you, it was not so much a specific group of people that we approached to get information from, those 20 or 40 people that we talked about earlier, but rather it was a diverse group. It was men, it was women, and they weren't older, but they were maybe middle age or approaching the retirement phase. They had some experience, but yet they were not in that traditional platform. The traditional is what we were trying to move away from as an organization per se. So we were looking more at that more lenient, flexible characteristic of those individuals that we selected for the assessment.
You've mentioned this, and I want to make sure we do a little deeper dive on it, and that's the value of diversity in the reinvention process. My sense is you work in a diverse environment. You live in a diverse environment. Can you begin to describe why being in a diverse environment is so critical to the success of reinvention?
Diversity gives you differentiation. It gives you varied backgrounds, varied knowledge bases to tap into, and it also helps you stretch yourself or your thing that you're trying to build in order to improve upon it. So you get those varied insights or opportunities for input to help you make that acceptable product.
Sonya, I could talk to you forever about your passion about reinvention and about your passion for the subject matter. But I want to make sure that I kind of go back through some of the key areas that you taught us as we've been listening to you today. One is, and I want to kind of go backwards in this, that diversity is the opportunity to create a unique combination. I think sometimes we think that if we push diversity away, we get focus. The reality is, what you just mentioned to us was diversity allows us to put the unique combination of elements together that no one can compete with, because they do not have that unique combination of elements. And that's one of the key roles of diversity that is that doesn't allow for a commodity type mentality in a competitive marketplace. The second thing that really struck me was how you were able to identify passion, not compassion, but passion for the entity, whether it's a city or a business or association, that the key driver of reinvention are those people who are willing to take ownership and have passion for seeing it change. And I think sometimes we misunderstand the role of passion as an energy driver in helping enhance reinvention. And I think you very clearly articulated that passion is a key to making things happen. You also were very direct in that ownership was there, that if you couldn't accept ownership to make it better, that you have to have probably ownership first before you can have the passion. And then if you include the diverse thought, that you can create the unique element of events, you have a combination there that's extremely important in reinvention.
Sounds explosive.
It sounds absolutely exciting, which is how all of our conversations always are, and why I always look forward to them so much. I want to thank you again for sharing your insight and your experiences and your talents regarding reinvention. It's really appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Pure Reinvention. Keep the conversation going and get alerts when new episodes are available by following us on Twitter @Pure Reinvention or sign up for our mailing list at purereinvention.com.